Hello lovely lot, my name is Max and welcome back to my YouTube channel and yet another Nottingham Forest match preview. We are back, we have navigated the international break successfully, England coming off the back of 2 wins against Switzerland and Ivory Coast respectively, and today we are bouncing back into the match previews talking about our upcoming clash in the Championship away from home against Blackpool. Before we do that, I've got a little bit of admin to get out of the way. Firstly, thank you so much for the response on the recent tier list that I put out on the channel. If you haven't checked out, I'll be in the icon above, where I talked about my keep and sell list for the Nottingham Forest squad at the moment, the players who I would look to move on in the summer and the players that I would look to keep. And like I said, the response has been fantastic to it. It's up near around 500 views, and in general those sorts of videos are doing really well at the moment on the channel, so thank you very much. And secondly, of course, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like down below and subscribe to the channel whilst you're down there. The support recently has been fantastic. We're getting very close to 400 subscribers and I'm hoping to hit 500 by the summer. With that being said, let's get straight into the Blackpool vs Forest match. No recap on our previous match, straight into things, and let's talk a bit about the Tangerines. Okay, as we usually do, let's talk a little bit about how Blackpool's season so far is going and give a little bit of context to this match. Well, Blackpool finished 3rd in League One last season, getting promoted to the Championship via the playoffs, following a 2-1 win at Wembley to Lincoln City in the final. And after a 6-year absence from the Championship, they've started life back in the 2nd Division pretty well, sitting pretty solidly in mid-table, with their manager Neil Critchley having assembled a really good squad, combining real good experience at Championship level and some decent young players who could move on to bigger clubs for good fees in the future. And with managers like Steve Cooper and Nathan Jones rightly getting quite a lot of praise for the achievements they've done this season, I feel like Neil Critchley's actually gone quite under the radar, having brought a team up from the playoffs from League One last season and having established them pretty comfortably in the Championship, and at times looked like they could even challenge for a playoff spot come the end of this season. And like I said, I think he deserves a little bit more respect for that, particularly considering the transition going on behind the scenes at the club at the moment, with the Oyston family having departed the club and new owner Simon Sadler having only taken charge a couple of years back, and with a new training ground on the way, it really seems like the club seems to be back on their feet and bouncing back to where they really belong in the upper echelons of the Football League, because they are a very historic club and it's great to see that. So with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about how Blackpool are actually doing under the hood this season. Do their numbers sort of line up with their mid-table position at current, or should they maybe be even higher in the league? We'll talk a little bit about that in this section. With a record of 14 wins, 10 draws and 13 losses, having scored 42 goals and conceded just 41, Blackpool are having themselves a very solid return to the 2nd tier of English football. Despite this, they aren't the most potent side in front of goal. Despite the fact they've scored more goals than they conceded, they're actually not doing that well in terms of generating chances, only generating around 10 shots per match, which ranks them 4th lowest in the Championship at the time of recording. For context as well, Forest take about 12 shots per 90, which ranks them sort of in top 7 of Championship teams, so it really is quite a gulf in the generation of chances between these two sides. Despite the fact that they only concede just over 1 goal per game, they're not doing exceptionally well in the defence this season, conceding 12 shots on average per match, which ranks them around 7th worst in the Championship at the time of recording. This means they're not just a very porous defensive side, but they're also a side who are regularly outshot by their opposition, which despite their league standing would suggest a team who should be in the lower third of the Championship reaches. So what can we actually take away from these stats? Well, firstly, we can say that they're having a pretty good season in front of goal in terms of their conversion rate, and this really lines up pretty well in the stats. They have a conversion rate of around 10%, which ranks them 5th best, joint 5th best in the league, that should be, meaning around 1 in their 10 shots they take per 90, averages out more or less as a goal. Moreover, defensively and in terms of their goalkeeper, they're having a pretty good season with their goalkeepers' individual performances. In goal, they have sort of rotated minutes between former City goalkeeper Daniel Grimshaw and experienced shot stopper Chris Maxwell, both of whom have a shot save percentage of around 70% or just above 70%, which we said in the past, a average in the Championship save percentage is around 68-69%, so they're both doing well above average for shot stopping, and that is a big part as to why they're probably as high in the table as they are at the moment. Despite this, it's actually one of their defenders who's picked up the accolade of being their best ranked player on Who Scored, and according to Who Scored, it is centre-back Marvin Ekpiteta. He's rated at about 7.03 according to Who Scored, and has had a really good story coming up to this season. As recent as just a few years ago, he was playing non-league football, and is a great rise for the Blackpool centre-back. and this reputation has been really well earned. He's an absolute threat from set pieces for Blackpool, possibly one of the biggest in their team at the moment, with 3 goals from their defence this season. He also wins the most aerial duels for a defender in the Blackpool squad of around 4 per match, and completes the most clearances in the squad at 5 per match. He isn't the highest volume passer, he doesn't complete a lot of passes in his matches, only around 37 per match, but he tries to be pretty adventurous with the passes that he does play, averaging around 7 long balls per match, which ranks him pretty highly in the squad. And in general, Blackpool are a long ball team, which is really seen his ability to pick out players further up the pitch, over 30 yards, really come to the front. He's been pretty good at doing that this season. Overall, Blackpool are having a really good return to the Championship this season, but it's definitely been propped up by several individually very good seasons from some of their players, and their stats under the hood suggest a team that really should be in the bottom third of the Championship rather in the middle, challenging for the top third of the Championship. But that's just what I'm sort of thinking. So with that out of the way, let's discuss a little bit more about what us Forest fans can expect from this Blackpool team on the day, how they're going to play over the course of the 90 minutes, and how Forest can get the most out of this game, hopefully pick up the 3 points on the road and keep pace with the playoff sides at the moment. So whilst Blackpool don't really have a specific shape that they try to adopt in all of their matches, they certainly have a lot of principles that you can see going forward in most of their matches, and it's pretty clear how former Liverpool Academy manager Neil Critchley wants his side to play during matches. Critchley prefers his side to adopt a double pivot in the midfield, whether this be a 4-4-2, which seems to be the preferred shape in the squad at the moment, or a more conventional 4-2-3-1, or even sometimes when he chooses to play a 3 at the back shape. The real advantages of a double pivot, of course, as you can probably imagine, is the allowance for more ground to be covered by more players. It gives you a little bit more defensive stability than a more conventional 4-3-3 that most modern pressing sides adopt. They tend to have a single pivot. If you look at Manchester City, they have Rodri. If you look at Liverpool, they have Fabinho, just as really good examples. And this is more conventional in the modern game, whereas a double pivot is being phased out, but it's definitely a very viable option, particularly at the Championship level. It's a little bit more physical. This midfield two usually consists of Ryan Wintle and Kenneth Dougal, who have been two of their best performers and most consistent performers over the course of the season, playing short little passes to the front men, but most importantly sweeping up and mopping up the back line and helping pick up loose balls to get the ball forward and up the pitch. For me, going forward is actually where Blackpool are probably the most exciting, or certainly the most interesting tactically in the way they shape up. I will talk a little bit about that now. They attack with what is called a front five. This has become a very popular term in modern football and in analytics and things like that. And basically what it means is it is a conventional front five, allowing a team to really exploit every individual area of the pitch. If you break a pitch up into 5 sections, you've got the centre of the pitch, you've got the 2 half spaces, and then you've got 2 wide areas. And this idea allows you to have a player occupying each zone, which really can create overloads and create chance creating opportunities for your team. This obviously consists of your 2 strikers in Blackpool's case and their 2 wide men if you're looking at their 4-4-2, and this 5th man can either come from the double pivot or it can come from one of their fullbacks, Luke Garbutt or Jordan Gabriel, who of course is a former Forest Academy player in his own right. This usually means that there's 1 fullback left over if they're trying to create an overload on one side of the pitch, and this fullback can then tuck inside with the double pivot, allowing for a little bit more defensive coverage. It kind of stops the ability for teams to counter out on them, as these players are usually a little bit more agile, a little bit more athletic, and can cover the space required when their opposite number bombs forward on the other side. This is a very conventional way in which teams attack in the modern game. If you look at Chelsea, they have the 2 wing backs in the wide space, they have their number 10s playing in the half space, and then Lukaku playing in the centre area. Same with Liverpool, Salah and Mane in the half space, Robertson and Trent in the wide areas, and Firmino through the centre. It's a very popular way of building up attacks. It enables overloads and it creates a sense of structure in the front line, whilst you can also rotate in those areas to create these overloads at the same time. The front 2 that they usually deploy consists of experienced striker Gary Medine and Jerry Yates, who between them have 8 goals and 7 goals respectively in all competitions this season, with Medine able to win knockdowns from long balls and Yates able to be a willing runner looking for the loose ball or looking to win the flick-ons from his strike partner. And interestingly, Blackpool also rank 5th in the league for long balls. This is usually how they get the ball from the back line to the strikers rather than building through the lines. They look to absolutely knock it long over 30 yards towards the strikers to win down, and it is very much a trademark of the way in which they play. The wide talent can drift into the wide areas, they can drift into the half space and are capable of going both ways. They can cross, they can be a more conventional build-up, and I would argue the most exciting of these players is Josh Bowler, a player who I've sort of talked quite a lot about in the past. The 23-year-old was actually very, very close to joining Forest in the January window, and you can see why he was so coveted by the club. He's arguably their best player at the moment, and certainly the biggest creator of chances in that side. With 10 goals and assists this season, he is their most productive player by far in this squad at the moment, and his greatest asset is his ability to get the ball from point A to point B through dribbling, being the best ball carrier in that Blackpool team with 2.6 dribbles per match. I would actually rank him top in the Forest squad as well if he had joined us in January. Such is his ability to get the ball into the box or high up into the final third. Overall, Blackpool are a very direct side, looking to win possession from their solid double pivot in the midfield and get the ball from back to front as quickly as possible, using that direct long passing that I mentioned earlier, 5th in the league for doing this, and their aerial prowess in their front two, Jerry Yates and Gary Medine. They then construct their attacks in the final third using a modern front five system, and they're a really fun combination of that old school grit and physicality and the new way in which attacks are built in the final third by more conventional sides, and I think this could be a really fun game when we end up playing them. So how can Forest counteract this? Well, firstly, we need to be very clever in the midfield. Their defensive midfielders are extremely good at what they do and could overwhelm Garner and Yates should they start, and I do think they should be the two who we start. I think they have that extra athleticism and a little bit more height in that midfield that they maybe lack, and I think that's going to be the key to get the ball into the final third for us. We may do well to try and hit them in wide areas on the counter-attack. They can be caught at sorts if they've got a few too many men committed forward, which can happen sometimes, and I feel like, as I've said in the past, this is where we do our best work, and if we were allowed to catch them upfield, we could really attack them in them wide areas, because it's going to force either their midfielders or their centre-backs to cover that space. And one-on-one, I feel like Brennan or Zinkernagel could have them on strings if allowed to get into that one-on-one situation. We should use the natural width we also possess in this side to generate our chances. We are a team who likes to play the ball in the wide areas and in the half space, and on the opposite side of that, Blackpool are a team who like to congest the central areas, so I think it's going to be really interesting, that clash. I think that's going to be the most important area of the pitch for us to create chances and also to defend, because they do have some decent wide talent. And of course, cutting out that long ball system, they are one of the best long ball teams in the Championship at the moment. Cutting that out is going to be key to stop them from scoring goals. Get Yates parked on Gary Medine for the entire 90 minutes and give Keenan and Brennan real free license to press their centre-backs, because that's where those long balls are coming from those defensive positions. And if you can press them and force them into rushing these chances, they're not going to be as likely to get the ball into the final third through these long passes, and that could be a really interesting way of breaking up play for us. Overall, I'm going to suggest this is going to probably be a Forest win. It's definitely a should-win game, and I feel like it's probably going to be a win on the day. Probably a 2-1 win, much like the reverse fixture back at the beginning of the season. And we could be in for a good game. Blackpool are a very unique side in the way they play, very unconventional for a Championship side, a little bit old school in the way that they play, and it's seen them really do well in re-establishing themselves in the Championship after that 6 years in purgatory. Of course, as always though, let me know in the comments section below where you think this game is going to end up finishing. I, of course, think it's going to be a 2-1, but I could definitely see Blackpool giving us a really tough game. It's an absolute must-win for us if we're going to be keeping chase with the playoff pack, and I do think we probably have that little bit more quality to pick up the win. And whilst you're down there, of course, don't forget to drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it. These videos come out every single time Forest are playing. I do a little preview, I talk about the opposition, and we usually have a bit of fun doing it. So if you're new around here, drop a like, subscribe down below. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the game, Reds. I will catch you later.